Welcome to the Half Moon Bay City Council special meeting of Tuesday, October 3rd. This is going to be a meeting to discuss and comment on the Parks Master Plan. So I'll invite staff to just dive in.
All right, I will do a quick introduction. We are delighted to have this work session for you tonight for a check-in on the Parks Master Plan before it goes into full drafting. Tonight from Blue Point Planning is Mindy Craig, the principal. They are our consultant who has been working with our community and the Parks and Rec Commission in developing this plan. Scott Phillips, our associate planner, has been the project manager on behalf of the city for this project. He can answer questions related to city things that may come up. We want to be very mindful of time, so the presentation has a lot of really fabulous information, and Mindy's going to try to click all the way through. There'll be time for clarifying questions. We know you already have some comment cards, so we want to definitely make sure public's had a chance to comment, and we got a lot of great comment out in the lobby before we began. So, Mindy, thank you.
All right, thanks. Well, I'll try not to go too speedily through this, but get to the meat of it. The primary idea here is that we're going to do an overview of what we've done to date very briefly, and then dive into the recommendations. So the Parks Master Plan is really focused on city parks. So we have a lot of different open spaces in the city. Parks are the real focus here. Plan Half Moon Bay, as your general plan, has been the foundation. We started there. We took all of the input from that and built upon that, including the guiding principles from that process. And we're updating and refining those, and we're also coordinating with the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan, which will come probably before you, and it's in about 4 to 6 months after us, but we're working with them and the community in hand. So the first piece of the pie was doing an existing conditions report, and that really sets our foundation and the baseline for our entire effort. A lot of times you hear about parks as acres per resident as how we determine needs. We see that as a much more robust question, and so we actually did a lot on community input, looking at the quality of the park. So are they meeting the needs and the purpose of our community? What's the profile? Who's living here? What are the demographics? What are those trends? And then outside of Half Moon Bay, in the region, in the state, and the nation, what's happening? Are there new trends and exciting things we want to leverage here? Accessibility, how easy is it for community members to get from a park to another? Not necessarily from a disability community, but from one neighborhood. And then finally, we do consider acres per resident. All those things come together as a parks needs, and those are all sort of embodied in the existing conditions report that we provided. So we've done a lot of outreach, both working with the Parks and Recreation Commission. We did an online survey. We did a lot of one-on-one stakeholder interviews. We did small group meetings over a couple days with everybody from environmental groups to other community groups, Latino Community Advisory Committee. We've done a community workshop, an open house like tonight. We also did open public meetings with the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Planning Commission. We also have a website where we're getting comments from that as well, and have connected when we can, again, with the Bikes and Pedestrian Plan. So just as a quick summary of the big things that came out through all this effort: size and usability of parks. Some of them are just too tiny to get all the things we might want to do in them, and so that's a challenge. Soccer fields, we don't have very many. We use a lot of the school fields, and that's great, huge opportunity. We don't have a practice field for that. Homelessness and homeless in certain parks, especially when they're underutilized, which is something we saw in a number of parks as a challenge. Environmental constraints, we have lots of those here in Half Moon Bay, so identifying places where we'd have new parks or expanding even the ones we have, those brush against it. Maintenance, something that came up pretty much in every single conversation I've had with everybody is maintenance, and so you'll hear that word a lot, and I'm going to hopefully leave you with that, remembering that. The idea of Half Moon Bay Islands was something someone mentioned, which is we have these neighborhoods which are sort of out, they look like they're surrounded by open space, but they don't have really any usable parks, and something that's a lack of connection, and Highway 1 is a big barrier for them. Just in June, as you know, you got recreation programming, but really until then we don't have anybody going into the parks and setting up community programs. Now there's a great opportunity for that. We really need bathrooms. I was talking to somebody in the hall earlier, and I said somebody could just be a contractor and go through your parks and update and develop bathrooms, and that would be a really huge benefit. And we're also missing some of the middle school and teen activities. Obviously, we have this great asset right outside, but there's mostly boys there, if you'll notice that. So we kind of could have a balance of that. How do we develop that? And then other amenities for both children and an older population. So there's some needs there. There's lots of opportunities. There's parks for residents. We can use some of the surrounding communities. We have lots of visitors here. Obviously, that's a huge draw. And how can we use those as a way of both enhancing the character of Half Moon Bay, but also an economic driver? Parks can be a huge driver and a visitor amenity, and we need to look at that. Clearly, what I heard again, maintain and improve our existing parks before we do anything else. That should be our first and foremost priority, and an opportunity there, and so you'll hear a lot about that. Strengthen our partnerships. The high school and the school in general, they're offering a huge amount of facilities. Let's keep on working with them, and same with the Boys and Girls Club and others. Get a community park. This we heard a lot of, and I'll tell you more about that later. And then connecting to nature. People here in Half Moon Bay love the surrounding wonderful open space. How do we use our active parks as a way to connect those two? Also, we just want to make sure we integrate all our ages into the parks. We activate the parks with that programming. We look at non-athletic activities. So you'll hear a lot about art and culture as we talk more. And just recognizing that it's a life quality issue of how we enhance these parks. And so they become really part of the fabric of Half Moon Bay, and we can do a lot here to make that even better. And I'll just point out this one picture here of the idea of a complete streets. That's sort of some different than what we usually talk about, but the Highway 1 is such a barrier within the community. Can we look at that instead as an asset that connects and creates the opportunity for the community to go across Highway 1, to go around that? You know, there's a big opportunity there to make that much more attractive, and other communities are doing that on Highway 1, so that's an opportunity. All right, so I want to go into the goals and guidelines really briefly. You should have had that in your packet. They're in detail here, so if I go fast, you can hopefully refer to them. These will be guiding practical ideas that as the staff moves forward through time over the next 20 years, they'll use these guidelines as a touchstone. Do these make sense to us? Is this fulfilling the actual intent of it? So this is pretty important for us to get right ultimately. And again, these are going to be aligned with the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan. Okay. So the first area is, again, enhanced quality of life and community. This is everything from the sense of place. We want to make sure the parks aren't just generic. We want to look at ways that actually say, this is Half Moon Bay. So I come here, not just for the Pumpkin Festival, but I can go to any of your parks and I'm like, oh, wow, this has some character. It's interesting and exciting. High level quality of maintenance, that's very important. The idea of play streets is something that we're exploring because we have some limited areas, especially in those islands. Can we actually create policies that activate the streets at certain times so the neighborhood can bring out a big storage container and bring out playthings and have fun in the streets and change some of those elements? I'm just going to hit on a couple of them in each one of them. Environmental sustainability and conservation. Huge, huge goal here. In one of those areas, how do we optimize access to open space, wetlands, and parks with visual and physical means? So is it boardwalks in some of the areas that may be not accessible? Also visual areas, like if I think about Poplar Beach and being able to have someone in a wheelchair go out onto a bluff and be able to look out. Making sure that we're using sustainable design practices, and then connecting people to that nature, using those parks as an element of that. Connected and accessible, again, this goes directly to the Bike and Ped plan, but there's also things like universal design guidelines, this idea that it's not just when you're in a wheelchair, it's if you have somebody in a stroller, if you hurt your leg and you're using crutches, how do we make sure our parks are truly accessible? And universal accessible design is a way to do that. Looking for ages and all abilities. You don't have enough parks to have individual parks for every single age, so we have to integrate that in each one. So how can we highlight that and make that really good? Using all our other access, the private and regional parks, and then expand access through our bike and walking. And obviously welcoming and safe for all is really important. Economic balance and feasibility, this is something that's also very important. We want to make sure that we don't do a single-use park that doesn't get used after a while because it's no longer an exciting trend, so we want to have that in mind. We want to look at our downtown vitality and how do parks work with that. We have MacDutra, Kitty Fernandez. What can we do in those, or Carter, that can really improve and enhance what the downtown groups are trying to do? Maintenance and operations, again, keep on talking about that, but that's going to be a reflection on the community. And then how do we look at revenue sources? Can we create some elements in the parks that allow some special fees for rentals, events, weddings, so forth? We have a lot of beautiful areas that I think could create some sustainable revenues for the city. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into the recommendations. Starting off with Carter Park, we really see this as an opportunity to, it's already used heavily by Shakespeare, the Half Moon Bay Shakespeare Company, so let's make it a real place, a culture and performing arts area, adding bathrooms and storage, creating a permanent kind of amphitheater. It can also be used by weddings. There's an opportunity to do like drama camps, things that are not necessarily those active sports for kids or older people. You could do Tai Chi, you could do a lot of things, but it needs to be activated, and right now, because of the lack of facilities, it's not activated, and people don't even know it's there. Kitty Fernandez, this is a park that has been forgotten by many, but there's some opportunities to re-enlighten and to create art in the parks. Right next to it is an art gallery, there's an art school, that's part of your community. How can we redesign that narrow area to be more interesting, to be exciting? And we have some ideas about how can it rid some of the walls, to use some of these ideas about imagery and plantings, to again, just make it inviting. There's a lot of people who can walk to that park, but right now there's no reason to. So how can we create that reason? Kehoe, tiny little place, not sure if you guys know, it's miniature, and it's not really used at all because there's nothing there. These little parks that I showed up here are exactly the same size, and so there's opportunities to create something that's exciting in a small space that's truly neighborhood oriented, and I call this the neighborhood backyard. It's something that really would connect with those neighbors, but be more interesting. And I like the one on the top right because there's not a play structure, there's big mounds, and so we're not trying to lock kids into an idea of how they play, it's just their imagination. So it creates an opportunity in a small space. So Johnson House, an incredible property that the city owns, hugely underutilized. We see huge opportunities here, and I'm going to talk about the two pieces. One is the lower area, and then one is the upper area where the house is. So one, we have a historic train station. Nobody would know that's there. So with the programs, could that be opened up? Could you actually create something there? But also, could we move some of the horseshoes that are at Smith Field and some bocce and put it to the Johnson House and have some synergies there? There's restrooms there, it's more accessible. It could create a whole new flavor for that area, along with better signage and wayfinding. And then in the upper area, you know, one of the things I heard over and over again is there's no place for larger picnics. There's lots of families and communities here in Half Moon Bay, a quinceanera, a wedding or something like that. There's no place for that. So how could the city create some larger picnic areas connected to the house where you could beautify more of the area? You could have a gazebo again for weddings, create bathrooms up there, and really activate that. The views are absolutely stunning, and there's plenty of space to create something really magnificent that's in keeping with the historic sense of that, and really nice. Poplar, I know there's already work being considered on this, but obviously we need to improve the access down to the beach. Look at ways of we can improve the visual areas, more delineated pathways so people aren't going off the paths and again eroding those pathways. You know, can we have some more informal areas where people could fly a kite? Are there picnic areas? How can we, again, have a very low impact but better improvement for the community, especially since the state beach is very overdone, overfilled? Can we use Poplar Beach and enhance those amenities? And then bathrooms are an important piece here. Smith Park, I think this is the one place in Half Moon Bay that the city owns that's active sports fields. It's a really important amenity. People use it heavily, lots of things going on with tournaments. There's dogs, there's horseshoes. There's an opportunity to take a look at the entire park, look at how we can maximize the space to get as much of that out of it and improve some of it, potentially put a walking track around it so people who are watching their kids in baseball can actually do some walking around it. Have a play area, which I already know is part of the CIP. Maybe have some informal turf area where they could have some practices for soccer, improve some of the concessions, and then look at the dog area and improve that as well. So on top of that, we did have some places that we want to do for new. Magnolia Park is actually a park the city already owns. It's actually bigger than Ocean View, and it's a completely flat, open area. So we see this as an opportunity that connecting to nature across the way is the Wavecrest property. So how can we actually create butterfly gardens, more natural play spaces, a community garden there where it feels very much in keeping with what you see. You can watch the raptors and connect more closely with nature, but be part of that neighborhood. So very low impact, but fun and interesting Half Moon Bay kind of park. A community park, so I mentioned this a couple times, there's really a need for this, and what is that size? A community park would be kind of close to what Smithfield is, about 10 to 15 acres would be ideal. Unlike Smith Park though, this would be without any kind of formal fields. This would all be around community. So this is a place where you could go with your family, there'd be something for everybody. We would have play areas, there'd be picnic areas. You could just really have some informal people playing Frisbee. It's something that just is about community. Linear parks, this is kind of a funny thing, but here in Half Moon Bay, again, trying to get everything out we can out of our space, there's a lot of trails, and as the bike and pedestrian plan is going forward, they're helping us look for locations along the trails that might be good places for, say, exercise. You might have a couple exercise stations as you walk. There might be some very small little play areas that might be nice, or a picnic area tucked into a little location. Activating those spaces a little bit more, and again, getting more out of our parks than before. A teen park, so I mentioned the skate park here. The teens don't really have a place to go and have fun and hang out. So is there an opportunity somewhere along the way? I mean, if there's ever a chance to expand over to the other side here next to the skate park, this would be a great synergistic experience. Things that are really meant for the older kids, where they are welcomed to hang out and maybe just sit around and do nothing, which is I know that they like to do. And something that has been mentioned, I know, in the general plan process a lot is a community pool. This is a tough one because it's a pretty expensive ask, both to build and to operate, and how do we find it? But as we're looking at 20 years and we're looking at partnerships, this is something we think that has to be on the table. And it's an opportunistic element, so can we see down the line this fitting in? I know that a lot of people would love to have it, and I've done a couple different things. That it wouldn't just be a whole bunch of lap lanes, it would really be a community pool, so you could go and play and have fun. You might have some recreational swimming as well, but it's different than a big lap pool. All right, finally, I'm just going to end here on opportunity sites. We spent a lot of time looking at different pieces of land through Half Moon Bay, location, size, how accessible is it, environmental conditions, which is a huge issue, who owns it, what's its intended use. And we evaluate a bunch. Sorry, this is sort of hard to see. All of them have varying degrees of possibilities. I'm going to focus on two, which really we see as a potential for working for a community park, and that is the Podesta site and the Post site. Those are both kind of in the realm of possibility in terms of size, in terms of the right location. We really feel like we need to be on that side of Highway 1. We need to be kind of closer to the center of town. And we need enough land to provide that. And we feel like there's some opportunities at both of those places to provide exactly what we're needing. The other ones have some substantial concerns that pretty much have made them fall off the edge there. So finally, I'm just going to end here. So right after we get feedback here from the community and from you, we'll be ready to start looking at drafting the plan, depending on those comments. We're hoping that we go through this process of talking with the Parks and Recreation Commission, Planning Commission, and so forth, any revisions, so that we could be adopted by the City Council sometime in early 2018. Because we want to make sure that we get all that input along the way. But that's sort of a very rough thing. We can come back to you with more exacting timeline again after we hear the comments. Here we are.
Okay, so I'm going to call up speakers. Is that a good process for everybody? I thought I would start with the speakers, and then we can deliberate. Okay, first speaker would be John Baldwin, followed by Lee Ellis.
I think we're on now, okay. My name is John Baldwin. I live here in town in Cypress Cove, right up above Carter Park. I'm also a board member of Half Moon Bay Shakespeare. I'm retired now, but I spent more than 30 years as a nonprofit fundraiser. And a good third of that amount of time was with different arts organizations. And I can't tell you enough how important arts organizations are to a community. Not only culturally, but economically. There have been a number of studies done over the year that shows that when people spend a dollar on the arts, it brings $7 into the community. And we do, as Half Moon Bay Shakespeare, draw a lot of people into the community every year during our Shakespeare season. But the park is also, if some of these recommendations are made, and I'm impressed with what you've done so far, if these recommendations are followed through, it's not going to be just Shakespeare in the park. It's going to be a lot of other things in the park. And so it's not just our cultural aspect and our economic draw on the community, but other people and other organizations and events and artists as well. So I think that the one thing that seemed to be missing, and I guess you'll talk about this at some point, is the cost. I'm just hoping that the cost is not going to be preventative for something like this, because I think if you spend the money on improving this space for culture in the community, it's going to benefit the community immensely. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Lee Ellis was next.
Good evening. My name is Lee Ellis. I live in Half Moon Bay. I am a co-founder of Half Moon Bay Shakespeare Company, and I serve as its associate producer, and I am an officer of the board. And as you know, the Half Moon Bay Shakespeare Company adopted Carter Park in 2012. We did so because we had a vision of Carter Park as a serene and beautiful place that had a lot of potential for being a venue for the community in many different aspects. Since then, we have been maintaining the park on a monthly basis, and we do bring in volunteers, and we really, really enjoy it. And we also want to thank the city for helping us with providing maintenance down there, and we work together with them, and that works out very well. We really appreciate so much that the city has included Carter Park in the master plan, and we're really happy to see the recommendations that are coming forward. Our dream is to continue providing classic theater in this community, and that is Shakespeare. And we hope to do that for many years to come. Although we would love to see bathrooms and storage come this way someday, there are a couple of small requests that I have, and I wrote this before seeing what was on the board out there. By the way, I want to thank you again and again and again for putting the stairs back into Carter Park. You cannot imagine how much the public really loves this and appreciates it, and we hear about it all the time. So thank you, and it was a beautiful job. Two things that would be really helpful to us if you could do it, and those are, we have a need for security lighting, and we have a need for just another electrical power source. In terms of lighting, We feel we need it for security. We all know that those of us that, go down there and perform and visit, that it is very, very dark there at night. And 2 years ago, we had an issue with this when we were performing Macbeth, and we had a break-in 3 times in our storage unit. The Sheriff's Department helped us out, and we really appreciate their efforts. But the power of the security lighting would be helpful to us also as our patrons leave at the end of our performances. The second thing is we would love to have an additional power source there. Right now, we have a power source that exists on the stage, and it's just 2 little outlets. There is another one at the top of the stairs on the path, right by the steps, and one of those 2 outlets is available to us. The other is not live. So what happens is that we run industrial power extension cords down that slope, and that's how we can connect up. We need our main stage lights, our peripheral lights, backstage lighting, and we need exit lighting. So we're running cables. So if that could be done, that would be tremendously helpful and appreciated. John L. Carter Memorial Park was created many years ago for its potential. The enhancement of the infrastructure there would have many benefits. So we hope you could consider these 2 suggestions. We thank you, and anything that we can do to help you or assist you in this, we will do. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Marcia Riley.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Riley, and I live in Half Moon Bay. And I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Half Moon Bay Dog Park. It's an absolutely wonderful little park right off of Smithfield and adjacent to the Horseshoe Club. And it's been around since about 2001, run almost entirely by volunteers. Several years back, in fact 2013, the city stepped up. Thank you, Rick, you were on board at the time, and helped us because our fence was literally falling down, literally falling down. And it's been a great improvement, and I want to thank you for that. What we need to talk about today, and what I need your help with and go on record with, is we also really need to have an ongoing maintenance program that I need your help with. We have wood chips that are supplied for free to us by different nurseries and tree service people, and it works out great. It's a very sanitary situation that we can keep really working well, except when the winter hits. And what happens is, as the dogs run around the dog park, they kick up the chips, and it all goes to the side of the fence, and there's nothing in the middle, hardly. So what used to happen, and it worked fabulously, was every quarter we would have, the city would come in, and they would use the truck and go in and pull the chips away from the fence and level it out. And it made such a difference in how usable the park was then throughout the rainy season. There was just no comparison. It didn't happen last year, and it was really, really unfortunate. We also need to have a regular maintenance of the parking lot, because it's obviously just a dirt parking lot. Grooves happen in there. It turns into a mud pit. And even if somebody can get out of the park without getting saturated and soaked, their dog runs through a mud puddle to get back into their car. And it really, really is not a good situation. So I'd really ask for that consideration on the routine maintenance. We take care of the day-to-day things. We really don't need a lot, but that is so important to us. And what we also really need to have happen that we learned last year was we really need to extend our walkway from our shed back to our water source. Because again, as it is now, when the rains hit, that just turns into a big mud puddle. We had to wall it off with chairs last year, and it really took until May, almost June, to dry out. So we just need that. It's not a lot. We'll work with you any way we can to get that done. In addition to resurfacing our entry gate, because that has worn away since 2013, and we have a lot of small dogs that use the park because it is a small and a large dog park right now, which that's another subject I'll go into. But little dogs can run out from the fence, and they get out, and then their owners totally freak and try to run around and chase them, and something's going to happen. But if you could help us do that, that would be awesome. And I just want to say that it's not just for our own citizens, but we get a lot of visitors from the Ritz-Carlton, the Half Moon Bay Lodge, are all referred to us. A lot of people come to our Half Moon Bay Dog Park website, look it up. They know about the park more than, unfortunately, some of our own citizens do. So it's a very great thing for our visitors to town, as well as our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Those are all the speaker cards that I have. So I'm bringing back to the council for questions to staff, comments. Oh, okay. That would be Carrie Burke.
Thank you, Mayor Ruddick, members of the council, Carrie Burke, and I really applaud your efforts to do this community outreach and to actually have a parks master plan, and the work that's done is very impressive. I'd like to echo some of my concerns was that maintenance is absolutely key in our parks, and I tend to be most familiar with the parks that are in my neighborhood, which is this area, and so the Carter Park and Mac Dutra and Kitty Fernandez, and actually even I use Johnson House quite a bit. But the maintenance is key. It's actually a little bit distressing to me to see some of our stalwart community volunteers actually cleaning up Mac Dutra Park, and maybe in new designs of facilities that they would be done so that they wouldn't be so maintenance intensive without being industrialized. And so it's just something to think about. One of the things that to me is really still missing is Redondo Beach. I know that there's hazards and other things to consider, but if we're thinking big for a 20-year plan, I think that's just such a wonderful opportunity to link up people that are using our coastal trails and experience the beach. So if there's any chance that we could still include Redondo Beach or some other access in that southern part of town, that would be fantastic. And finally, I am a swimmer, so I have used the high school pool, and it's been always my dream that we could have something similar to the Fleischacker pool that I enjoyed as a child in San Francisco and then moving here to the peninsula. But that really the same thing is that we have, I think if we could do something really spectacular and have a great type of aquatic center, since we are by a marine environment, it would just be wonderful. So I know it all takes money, time, and will, but hopefully as a community we can make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this time bringing it back to council. Who would like to start? Councilmember Rohrbach.
Thank you so much, Mindy. This was a really good presentation, and I learned a lot, and I visited most of these parks, and I'm looking forward to some of the developments that are going to happen. I have a number of comments. They shouldn't take too long. Some of them are fairly trivial. Some of them are more significant. Starting off with the train depot, it'd be nice if there was a bathroom right in the train depot and people didn't have to schlep outside. It would encourage more meetings to actually happen in the train depot. In terms of the upper Johnston House area, you recommend removing the existing picnic tables? I don't know why.
If you've seen them lately, they're pretty rickety, and they're kind of balanced around the house, and it kind of takes away from the house. So if we can put them in really strategic ways around the house that are more designed for picnic areas, so that we don't lose any of it, but it's just a better design aesthetic is more to that. So maybe that's not as clear.
Okay, yeah. No,
Yeah,
I'm all
and
for
it's not, we
that,
want more
yeah.
picnics. It's just kind of,
Okay.
the current ones are a little bit,
Yeah.
they don't work as well with the houses I think we could.
Okay, but you still would like to have some,
Oh,
okay.
definitely,
Perfect.
absolutely.
Perfect. In Mac Dutra Park, you recommend consideration of art and a new mosaic. I'm 100% in favor of that. I've advocated before for having a community mural that would be placed there. I really think that that would be a wonderful location because the whole community gathers in Macdutra. So that's something I favor greatly. Here's a totally trivial comment, but you do talk about Smithfield as a community park. It's not a community park, it's a community ball field. So that's neither here nor there, but I just wanted to make sure that we don't not have a community park because we think we already do. We don't. Here's an expensive thing, but some constituents have mentioned that the field in Smith Field is kind of dangerous. And there's a movement to try to resod it, to get artificial turf, to do something that will reduce the risk of injuries there. So that's something to consider, but I understand that's expensive, but it might, in the end, be worth it. What else? You talk about removing or repurposing the historic bunkers. From my perspective, if they went, I wouldn't feel like a loss of history, but I know other people would. They're ugly. But my main point is the tremendous importance of a real community park. Okay, we don't have a community park. Half Moon Bay has been incorporated for something like 70 years, and it's just needs to happen. There's no question about it. And considering the two possible locations that are large enough and that are conveniently located, I very much favor the Post property. I think we can negotiate with Post and get that property. I love some of these ideas you suggested for putting in a community park. Let me add a couple more, and then I'll shut up. You talk about pickleball. I think pickleball could belong there. You talk about community gardens in various other parks. It seems like an absolutely logical place to put community gardens in that community park. And you don't mention, but I think would be a good idea to have bike and pedestrian trails inside that nature area that has lots of interesting wetlands and places that the public would like to be able to walk and bicycle in. So those are some of my comments, and mainly I really appreciate the good work that you've done. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Penrose?
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful presentation, and thank you, public, for all of your comments. I have two issues. One is the most important thing that I think we need to do is consider maintenance, and that's of our existing parks and safety. So correct lighting, correct maintenance, good bathrooms, those kinds of things being taken care of in the parks that we already have is number one. Number two, I agree with Council Member Garbach, a community park is critical, and I think Post property is the perfect location for that. You're already working with a bicycle pedestrian pathway, so that is a natural segue into dealing with, you know, the proper uses of a community park. That's mostly what I had to say. Thank you.
Councilmember Kowalczyk.
Thank you. Thank you for the public, and thank you for the hard work on the you've been doing collecting this information for our community. I have an ask. Can I please have a list in a spreadsheet or email of all the parks? Just I've visited all of them, or some of them, most of them, but almost all of them. But I want to make sure I spend time at all of them. I guess I've been to all of them over time. I want to go to all of them next week, so I have a current view.
Yeah, we actually have done a full inventory and a database for you, and it's actually in the existing plan, but we can get you that,
that's fine.
absolutely.
If I missed it, that's perfect. I'd like to, a couple of comments just for clarity. I've heard my fellow council members refer to community park. I want to know the attributes of that. How are you defining it, a community park? Just if you could share some of that.
I'm going to use some of the community members. One of the meetings I had, small groups with Latino community, they came in and says, we just want to be able to go with our family, spend a day someplace where we all can enjoy it. So if my teenager's there, if my small child is there, if my mother-in-law, any age, that there are activities there for us, and it is a place where we feel free to do, just to be there. So it's not formal, it's not organized sports, it's not prescribed in any way. It's one of the few things we don't have in our society, right? We are always scheduled and everything else. This is the opposite of that. It's the idea that we can have a big grass area and we can just run on it. And so that attribute is, a place where you can do whatever you want to do. And so having the flexibility of space, an area, and making sure that it doesn't get taken over by other formal activities. We've talked a lot about where a performance park or an art park or a sports park, this is anything and everything to people, if that helps.
It does help, thank you. So overall, and I appreciate the Vice Mayor's comments, I think minimally for the parks plan, we need minimum standards across all of our parks for maintenance, upkeep, expectations. There was a situation a few years ago where one of our parks was off the beaten path, and then there was an incident there, and it's since been cleaned up. I'm talking about Oak Avenue Park. And I just want to make sure that we have, this may be more for looking this way, more of an operating plan and staff and budget set towards minimum standards for all of our parks for upkeep and for play structures. So you can go to any one of our parks. So a park in a expensive neighborhood looks like a park in a lower cost neighborhood. So everyone has the consistency. That's just a general comment about that. Regarding Johnson House, I think part of this discussion needs to include acquisition of the property under which the house sits. It doesn't belong to the city. It belongs to the county. And so it is, while it is maybe a park, and we own we have authority over the house, we do not have the land. And I think that's very important that that becomes part. Maybe there's a situation where that could become part of Half Moon Bay. Well, maybe we have the land, but it's not in the city of Half Moon Bay. And I think it needs to be in the city of Half Moon Bay. That, and even a bigger piece than that would be great to be within the city of Half Moon Bay if we could put that on our radar. You talked about the trail. I appreciate that. I'm going to bring up something, and I will be laughed at, but I think it's a great idea, so I'm going to bring it up again.
Here it comes.
So previously we had discussed putting a flag on MacDutra Park, and okay, you come up with a better idea to attract people to Main Street. All right, come up with something, but at least I have something on the table. And so what I have on the table is there's some drawings for this as well, and some renderings about putting a flagpole either near or in MacDutra Park for a couple reasons. One, we often hear people come to Half Moon Bay and they don't know we have a Main Street. Literally, I live in Cypress Cove, and people will drive down my street, which is off Main Street, and say, is there a Main Street here somewhere? And I direct them. Of course, they find it. But I think that's one idea, and if you don't like it, well, then I think you're short-sighted, or come up with something better. And then let me get to Smith Field. Before Smith Field, talk about the community park. Totally support having a community park. We own a bunch of land already. Maybe we don't need to buy more land. So just keep that in mind. We do own Beechwood property, and that's something to keep as an idea in the back of our head. If we're going to spend millions of dollars on a new piece of land, let's make sure we evaluate that against what we already own. To Smith Field, I read the review and the input already. I really think, with all due respect, it lacks ambition. I really think it could be so much more. It can fit the need of what you've heard from your survey. We need a place to meet, a place to go with our families. It's not just about having some ball fields there and a dog park. It can have a great dog park, have great ball fields. Do we need to have a field house? Do we need to have, when we talk about what do you need to talk to the Little League, we just want our parking lot paved, right? We hear that. Well, that's great. That's perfect. They need that. But if we're going to be ambitious for our parks master plan, if it's truly a master plan, I think we should be ambitious. And Smithfield is the place where I think we should be ambitious. Whether it's new fields, new turf, a vision for a field house. Maybe we have programming there. Maybe it's on the coast, access to the coastal trail. Maybe we provide rental bikes where you just rent them with your cell phones. Really, a much more expanded view of what that could be, including walking trails, just a much, much bigger vision. I just think, I don't want to think in terms of, if you put a budget around it, like, I don't want to think in terms of if we do $100,000 worth of work there, we could, do some cosmetic things. If we do $4 million worth of work there, $5 million worth of work, what could this be for our community? It could be something really epic. And I think part of our master plan needs to be a vision that we can strive for that could be something really terrific for our community. And the last thing I'll comment on is the horseshoes at Johnson House with bocce and that. Really great idea. Please make sure you talk to the horseshoe people. They are so passionate. And if they're not in agreement, I'm not in agreement. If they're in agreement, I am in agreement. Thank you.
Councilmember Eisen.
Yeah, this is a great amount of information. I'm going to address a couple of different topics. And you talked about it a little bit, but one is the partnership we have with our existing schools. So we have 3 schools here, for the most part in Half Moon Bay, Hatch, the middle school, and the high school. Each one of them has their own gymnasium, ball fields, different aspects to it. I don't understand the combination of how the city is using those facilities and how the school is using those facilities. They seem to sit empty a lot of times, and then sometimes they're used. So I'd like to see if we can somehow figure that piece out to maximize the ability to use those settings. In conjunction with that, the field at Hatch is currently just a big dirt patch. There's no grass there. It used to be a grassy field. So that seems to be a possibility for the turf field that exists at the middle school, which could add to the soccer fields that you're talking about and have a variation of other different uses. But as is right now, there's the construction going on at Hatch, and so it's just been driven on, and I don't even know what the plans are for that, but it'd be good to, I assume, there are plans for it possibly, but I've never seen them, and so just talk about that and the future of that aspect of it. In terms of age for parks, so I think Half Moon Bay does a very good job for the probably up to about 6 to 7 year olds. We have the Ocean View Park, we have Kehoe Park, we have the park in Frenchman's Creek. There are little neighborhood parks that you can bring your little kids to. We don't have anything in Half Moon Bay currently that goes beyond the 6 to 7 year old set. So I have a child 6, I have a child that's 9, and those parks don't exist here. So that could, to me, could be, and you mentioned that in here, which is great, but it's kind of like that teenage use, that next level where there's climbing structures, there's maybe a zip line that exists. I grew up in Ashland, Oregon, and the town is actually situated around Lithia Park, which was designed by the same people that did Golden Gate Park. So the park was a huge aspect of our community, and I would love to see that happen a little bit more in Half Moon Bay moving forward. Having a community park is a big priority. I like the idea of dealing with the parks that we currently have first, because we have to prioritize the whole process, and so we already have parks that exist. So maybe we start there as we move into the other parks that exist, and we go through that process. I think the Post property is a great piece of property as well, and the community pool is something that, and it's true, because Half Moon Bay is a colder environment a lot of times, but for the people that would be using a pool, the children, generally speaking, they don't care. The temperature outside is not a detriment to people going into a pool. So I think that'd be another great use. And the skate park is something I frequent probably once a week, and there's always 15 to 20 kids in this skate park. So, I mean, if we build these pieces of community activism, you know, so people can be active, it's going to get used. And there's no better use, as far as I'm concerned, for the community than being in a park, being athletic, being outside, being in nature. That's kind of what Half Moon Bay is all about. So I'm interested in that. And then lastly, the equipment used along the trail. So those kind of like gym structures. So I love that stuff in theory. And I don't know if it exists in a way that could work in Half Moon Bay, but you know, with the fog and all the moisture and the ability, like the amount of rust that could happen on those types of things so quickly, like a great idea could all of a sudden turn into something that needs to be maintained, we've been talking about, but just would rust really fast. So I'd be curious to make sure that we've done our due diligence to understand all the aspect before we put something like that in. But we do have people running those trails literally all the time, so it would make sense to have little spots where they could get off and do that activity. So I love the idea, just want to make sure we've done our due diligence on that part. That's all I got.
Thank you. So the thing that's going on that strikes me as really important as relates to parks is there's going to be a parks bond, a statewide parks bond on the ballot in June 2018. The governor hasn't signed it yet, but he's anticipated to sign it in a big signing ceremony sometime in the next week. It's $4 billion, and it has many different pots of funding. A lot of it's for state parks, deferred maintenance, but there's a few different pots for local governments, cities and counties, and some of it's per capita, and some of it is just minimums. So out of the per capita pot, we'll get at least $200,000 to do something with. So I think we want to go through the Parks Bond and see what sort of fits our vision here. And I noticed that one of the priorities in the State Parks Bond is the rehab and maintenance of existing local parks. That's kind of a priority. We've made a huge investment over the years in California in these things. A lot of them are outdated, a lot of them don't serve disadvantaged communities. So I agree with others who have said the priority should be first on modernizing and rehabbing our existing park facilities. And ultimately, I think we want to have a future discussion about maintenance in general and how we're going to fund that. We might want to consider a 2018 ballot to provide our own local funding for parks. They've been generally very successful statewide. I wouldn't put it on the same ballot as the statewide parks bond, maybe the November 2018 bond, but something that allows for maintenance of our parks, a dedicated funding source, but also just maintenance in general. Maybe it's a small sales tax increase that would take care of, you know, sidewalks and street trees and just general upkeep of our community. I don't think anything's more important to create, you know, community pride, to enhance our real estate values. To me, it's kind of bottom line, and I would rather not spend a lot of money investing in new facilities if we can't come up with a way to maintain and improve, you know, what we have. So that's really important to me. I do favor planning for a community park, and I think the 22 acres east of Stone Pine is a good location for that. I think there's probably some useful investments we can make at Smithfield, but I think there are a lot of environmental constraints, drainage being a major one, but perhaps we can improve parking, road access, field surfaces. I think there's probably some investment we can make without like expanding it. So I think that's where we're going to run into really big dollars, and for one segment of the community, you know, the active athletics. I'm not saying don't invest in it, but I'm saying be careful. Yeah. I think Councilmember Eisen brought up the issue of partnerships, which I think are really important. So I would say not just the schools, but I think we need a more regular relationship with state parks folks. I don't know what the potential is for, you know, maintenance agreements like for Coastal Trail, or enhancing areas that provide access to the state parks that are adjacent to state parks. But I think we need to consider improved relations with state parks. And they're going to be getting out of this bond probably $1 billion. So they're a source of revenue, perhaps doing upkeep on Kelly Avenue that provides access to state parks. I want us to attend to areas around the state parks as well. Certainly the coastal trail is a real important feature. I think that's going to be addressed by the bike and pedestrian master plan. But I think to enhance use of it, I think we need to attend to Poplar Beach and make investments there. Somebody, I think it was Kelly Burke, talked about Redondo Beach. I think at one time there was a developer that was supposed to contribute funds for a stairway there. We might take a look at that and find out what the status of that is. But again, these are important areas, not just for residents, but tourists as well. So I think we have to sort of, find a balance there. I'd like us to, I know you'll deal with this in the other plan, but while we're rehabbing our neighborhood parks, why not put bike racks everywhere where there are not bike racks? Let's enhance, access. And also, we talk about goals of sustainability, have, good trash receptacles and recycling. I'm all in favor of restrooms, but again, that's a maintenance issue. Again, we have to look at funding for that. I think we've had a nice rainy winter. I think we want to be prepared to deal with drought, and I would say that where we can, in existing and new parks, we want to reduce our water demand, whether it's where feasible, where we're not doing active athletics, maybe pulling up turf, doing decomposed granite, native plantings, xeriscape, something to reduce water use. I think is going to be really important. And it also can reduce, the maintenance. If we're having to mow and irrigate, that's a lot more work, I think. I like the ideas proposed for John Carter Park. I think that could be enhanced beautifully with a minimum of investment. I do think it would benefit from restrooms and security lighting. It is sort of a out of the way place where it's not visible from public streets, so it could be a safety issue. I like the ideas for the Johnston House. I think it's a great idea. I think that pretty much covers most of my comments. Vice Mayor Penrose.
Yeah, thinking about the community park and the community pool, it might behoove us to look at the Post property as a place for both of those. Excuse me. And I'm thinking more in terms of an indoor pool that could also provide a community meeting room, and surrounding that, having a community park.
So I have basically one last comment. So I'm fully aware now of the popularity of pickleball, and bocce ball seems to be taking off. Well, the good thing about bocce ball anyway is that you can kind of fit it in a relatively, small area. And that can be played by a lot of different, folks, different age groups and abilities. So I like the idea of looking to put bocce ball, where we can. And pickleball, I think, needs a little bit more, but certainly the demand is high, and where we can do it, I think we should. Let me just finish. So the pool, I think, is a really interesting idea. So I work in the conservation and recreation industry, and I've become aware of a lot of different community pools up and down the state, and they are really expensive to build, and they are really expensive to maintain. And I know of several instances where it just became too much and they had to reduce hours. They have to staff them up. So I think that sort of, it's okay to have it in the plan, but I think that's going to require, really careful attention and lots of partnerships, lots and lots of public fundraising. But, it is a really big ticket item, so it deserves, I think, focused, separate attention at a future date. And then Councilmember Eisen, you had something else?
And just one last thing. I talked to the Parks Department recently about sand volleyball. So we have it's weird to be a coastal community without sand volleyball courts anywhere. We have sand, and it's not that expensive. It does take a little bit of space. We don't necessarily always have that by the ocean, but we could bring it up. But it's, I looked up the cost. It looks like it's about, $4,000 to $5,000 per court. Maintaining them could be a whole nother story, but it'd be something that I would love to see.
And thank you. I do have one final comment, and it's related to a community park and Smithfield. I think we should spend the effort to examine Smithfield if there can be a community park element to it as well. There's a lot of space there. There's also environmental concerns, and I think we should make the most of it, whether it's sand volleyball, some open space, some trails. I think there might be a meeting there. And I want to be careful not to assume we have to acquire a piece of land to have a great park and a great community park, because that will eat up our assets. Thank you.
Just respond to that. So, I love Mindy, the description you gave of what a community park is. Really, it's the public commons, right? It's like, the commons in Boston or the great parks in Chicago, where the public can assemble and do whatever they want. They can just be, they can observe, they can do a lot of different things. And I think that's really, really important to a community, is to have a great public commons. And I think the thing that makes the 22 acres so attractive is that it's close to downtown, it's close to the schools. You don't have to get in your car to go there. I know that we have some trail connection to Smithfield, but it's well located to create a community focus. So a location near downtown actually offers, multiple benefits that I think that Smithfield does not. And so that's why I'm supporting that. But I think great public spaces make a great community. And I think we ought to find a way to fund it and maintain it, even if it requires a separate new funding source. And actually, there's more money available out of the state parks bond if there is a local funding source. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And I'll say thank you to the consultants and staff for a great job, and thank you to the public that have weighed in and taken the time to reach out to us. These are really important things. It's part of the greatness of our community that we can envision some changes like this. So thanks again, and have a good evening. And we're going to adjourn this meeting. And we'll resume the regular city council meeting after a 10-minute break. Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Half Moon Bay City Council of Tuesday, October 3rd, 2017. Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Eisen,
Yes.
Councilmember Kowalczyk,
Here.
Councilmember Rohrbach,
Here.
Vice Mayor Penrose,
Here.
Mayor Reddick.
Here.
You have a
Please all
quorum.
rise. Oh, thank you. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening. Let's see. It's for public comments. So we have no proclamations and presentations this evening, and I do have some announcements of community activities and community service. Try to be brief. So while I think of that, so the Pumpkin Festival, our great and wonderful Pumpkin Festival, will be Saturday and Sunday, October 14th and 15th. So that's coming right up, and I believe the Pumpkin Way Off is Monday, the 9th? Monday, October 9th. And that's scheduled for Kitty Fernandez Park typically, so don't. IDES. Or IDES, okay, so it's changed.
No.
I thought it used to be at Kitty Fernandez. No. Oh, okay. I haven't been there in a while. So head on down there on Monday, October 9th. It should be exciting. And hope you've all signed up for volunteer work in the various booths. Get here early if you have to drive. So there are a few other things, important things going on. So the County of San Mateo Health System will be beginning their 2017-2018 free flu vaccine clinics. And in Half Moon Bay, the first one will be at the Half Moon Bay Library. It'll be the Stanford Flu Crew on Saturday, October 28th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then on October 4th to December 20th, you can get a free flu shot at Rotacare Coastside Clinic, 225 South Cabrillo Highway, Suite 100A. You have to be ages 18 years or older. Those are Wednesdays, by the way, 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. There will be another at Moon Ridge Housing, 2001 Miramontes Point Road in the community room. That's Tuesday, October 17th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then November 4th, Saturday, 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. at the Coastside Senior Housing, 925 Main Street. Don't forget to get your flu shot, especially if you're ages 55 and older, or you have, or your young children, I believe, and mothers. Probably not pregnant mothers, but anyway. So there's going to be an immigrant workshop sponsored by the Coastside Immigrant Action Group. It's Half Moon Bay's Immigration Action Group's Family Preparedness Planning Workshop this Saturday, October 7th, 1 to 3 p.m. at the Half Moon Bay United Methodist Church, 777 Miramonte Street in the Social Hall. Also on Wednesday, October 18th at 7 p.m., there will be a candlelight vigil for a united community. That's at McNutter Park, corner of Kelly and Main Streets. And there will be an information fair, learn of opportunities here on the coast to help out the immigrant community. That's going to be Sunday, October 29th at noon. And unfortunately, there's not a location identified with that event. And then on November 2nd, there will be a community workshop to present options for the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And perhaps the city manager or planning manager can identify the location for that. And those are all the announcements I have today. Oh, So that event will be here at the Ted Adcock Center. Thank you. Bear with me here. Okay, so next we have city manager updates to council. We have two, it looks like Poplar Beach update and grants writing update.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've got a couple of more formalized updates, and we will be brief. And then I've got a couple of updates on the library, and I can't remember, one more thing coming up after that. Go ahead and get started. So I'll have, I think, Dan, are you going to, Dan Burrows, our Public Works Superintendent.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. As you can see from the picture, it's been quite a challenge this summer, and even though most of the heat is behind us, we still have an ongoing challenge at Poplar Beach and the surrounding areas of the parking lot and the trail as well. These pictures were taken during Labor Day weekend, which we had an extreme heat spell, but this type of trash load, you want to say, is actually more common on more days than just your hot weekends. And it's currently an issue that we are continuing to work on and find solutions for. So one of the solutions that we're looking into is, currently our staffing, we have 2 maintenance workers who handle all of our maintenance activities, trash, from everything from trash to the maintenance of our city parks, streets, and facilities. Also on a weekend basis, these 2 gentlemen are also the ones who handle the trash load at such areas like Poplar Beach on an overtime basis. No other public works functions are done on the weekends, only trash for purposes of keeping our parks and our amenities clean for not only our community, but also the visitors that are heavy on the weekends. That being said, we're also in the process of recruitment and selection for our 2 maintenance workers that have been approved for the fiscal year 17-18 budget, and we hope to have them on board close to the end of this month. One of the solutions that we are going to be taking on is the installation of Big Belly smart receptacles. The pictured below, you'll see 1 dual unit. It's recycle and garbage. We are going to be purchasing 4 of those units, and they're considered high-capacity units. They have the ability to be hands-free if you've got your hands full, or you just don't want to touch something that's germ-infested to throw something away. These containers have the capacity of 35-gallon containers, much like most of the garbage cans we have throughout the city. However, they do compact. They're solar-powered compactors, and they can compact up to 150 gallons of trash and recycling waste. These will be installed within the next 4 to 6 weeks. 6 weeks is kind of like our benchmark, but we hope to have that done sooner. And they are web-based, so we will have a dashboard from a management perspective to where we can see, are they reaching capacity? Do we need to get out there more often than just our daily routine inspections, or is it something that throughout the day, is it filling up that we need to service once again? Also, currently we have 1 3-yard dumpster on site, and we're going to be removing that dumpster and putting 2 2-yard dumpsters in place. The current 3-yard dumpster is a little high. It's a little tall for most residents and community users to throw away their trash, so a lot of them choose not to use it. So it's been a challenge as well. So going to the 2-yard system, we will have 2 shorter units and also gaining 1 additional yard of capacity. And we'll also be installing a new pay station machine. We've had a lot of issues with our recent machine out there, so we're purchasing a brand new machine. We estimate that to arrive in about 2 to 3 weeks, and it'll be installed. And we'll be remarking each space to have a number, and we'll be doing a pay by space. You can coordinate your numbered space. If you're parked in space 15, then you would signify that that's where you're spaced. So you can either use the printed ticket or not. From an enforcement perspective, you'll still be able to do that a little bit more efficiently. Also, we'd like to improve the signage throughout the facility to better educate the public for better waste management practices. our philosophy is try to instill, if you pack it in, please pack it out. If waste receptacles are full, please be mindful of the fact that they are full and bring it with you as you leave the facility. Also, we'd like to, similar to dog bags for poop purposes, we'd like to install some trash dispensers for normal use. They're actual trash bags, 35-gallon trash bags that you can bring down to the beach with you if you didn't bring some of your own. That way you can pack it out. It's a little bit easier for you to pack out your trash. A lot of times you go to the beach and you don't realize how much trash you have until you've already picnicked and had your lunch. So it's a little bit easier this way. We're gonna try to help you out in that regard. So this is a little aerial shot. It's a little hard to see from this perspective, but it kind of outlines a little bit of the locations of where we're going to be installing these new big belly trash cans, also where we're going to be putting signage, the bag dispensers, and so forth. The big belly trash cans were all going to be placed in one complete bank right along the trail, and as you would enter down to the public beach access on Poplar Beach. So that way when you're either coming or going, you'll be passing the bulk of the trash cans to be able to dispose of your trash properly. And also, we've commenced on our weed abatement. We have some environmental restrictions as to what areas we can and can't do without a biomonitor. On the right side of the fence along the path, we have the ability to do that during our normal maintenance and operations, and we've since done so. But some of our ditch maintenance, which is on the left-hand side and borders the street, has to be done in coordination with a biomonitor because it is a waterway. So that will be embarking on the week of October 16th. Not only Poplar Beach is affected by this, but a lot of our drainage ditches throughout the city as we gear up for our wet weather. And that's all I have today. If you have any questions on Poplar Beach, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thanks, Dan. Do you have questions for Dan?
How does the Big Belly communicate with the world? Is it through cell towers or what?
It is through cell towers. They're solar powered and they're completely wireless, and they do communicate through a cell tower.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay. Councilmember Eisen.
I just want to thank you, because I know I've brought this issue a couple times. I appreciate all the different kinds of solutions you guys have tried and ideas, and it's amazing how difficult it is to estimate how much garbage comes to these beaches. And so I just appreciate your efforts, because I know you've tried a bunch of different things, and we continue to move that along. So thank you so much, because I have noticed, especially recently, it's very clean out there. And I know that takes a lot of effort, so thank you.
Not a problem. I failed to mention earlier also, during most of the summer, as you notice, our staffing levels are really low. I'd like to thank the community also. They've played a big part in helping keep not only Poplar Beach clean, but also many of our parks. As you just listened to a lot of our community members in the Parks Master Plan update, that they're very active, and it's very evident that they're active, and also without their support, we would have even more work to do, even more than we already have. And so it's really great to see the community come together and help us out. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Dan. Now we have another report.
Yes, Matthew Chittister will give us a report on our grant writing program.
Good evening, Council. I'm Matthew Chittister, your Deputy City Manager. With me is Alex Gibbs. He is a consultant with Townsend Public Affairs. And earlier this year, the city contracted with Townsend to provide, among other things, grant writing services to the city. And we just wanted to provide a very quick update to you on the work that they're doing and the efforts that are happening. The scope of their work includes identifying local, state, and federal grant opportunities, and then working with staff throughout the process to create the applications, to submit them properly, and then to manage the grants that we do receive. Currently, there's requests out for $3.13 million in grants, and they continue to look for additional grants that will benefit the city and the community. And so that number will continue to grow. These grants are all progressing very well. We look to be in the running for several of them, and we should see probably several $1 million come to the city because of these grants. Really quickly, I'll just kind of summarize the types of grants we have. There are several grants related to bike and pedestrian safety improvements and improvement projects that are really key to linking the coast side and making it safer for all members of the community to move throughout the community on bikes and on foot. We also have a couple of environmental and flood control grants that will help also with a lot of the big issues we're dealing with environmentally here. Just as a side note, we've been talking with them about some parks grants opportunities, ball field grants, and as our Parks Master Plan progresses, there are some great opportunities to help us actually fund those projects, so we're excited about that. And as you talked about the state bond, Alex mentioned that he's got a lot of information he'll be providing to us about that, so they'll be a great support to us. They're a real asset to our team, and because they have offices in Sacramento, also provides some legislative help to us and keep us abreast of a lot going on, including things like cannabis. So we're really appreciative of their work, and I think we'll see the fruits of their labors very soon, and we're excited about that.
Are there any questions for staff or Alex from Townsend?
Yeah.
Councilor.
Yeah, so I guess those are some of the grants that you've been working on that were up on the board. I just wanted to get a sense of which one, what is the process that you're going through to understand, is staff communicating with you about which grants we're interested in? How do you discern which one is a viable grant for Half Moon Bay?
I'll let Alex respond to that question.
Thank you, Council Member. I would like to first off start by saying that when we were initially brought on, we had an onboarding process. Onboarding is the term we like to use for our initial kind of getting to know staff and your priority list. This took place in January, and staff brought out your CIP list and made us very aware of your priority projects. That was the starting point. We then took that list and identified various grants at the state, federal, and private level that would be applicable for those opportunities. Part of our role as Townsend Public Affairs is to identify which grants you would be competitive for and which grants you're eligible for but may not be the best use of staff time to go after. So after we have that CIP list, as grant announcements are made, we then work with your staff, the engineering department, the parks department, or whoever it may be, always going through the city manager's office as well to ensure that it is a project that we do want to pursue. After that staff conversation, really, that is when we come to a decision whether or not it's a grant application that we feel is appropriate for the city.
Very good answer, thank you. What do you consider a good, is there a general return on investment, generally speaking, that you strive for in your model at all?
So that is a really good question. Unfortunately, with the way that the grant world works, it is very difficult to establish a return on investment up front. So what I like to communicate to clients is my frame of success is, are my clients happy? Are city staff happy? Are the council happy? And that may be from a dollars perspective. Are we bringing in more dollars than we're costing, which is always the #1 priority for us as staff. But also, in addition to what the Deputy City Manager alluded to, we do provide legislative assistance as well as informational assistance to staff when need be. So we want to make sure that we're always providing benefit and use to staff, making sure that everyone is happy with our services on top of a solely, dollars for dollars type of investment.
One more. Curious. And then just in terms of the way the contract's written always with you guys, have you ever had a contract written where let's just say there's so much that a city spends for the services, and then there's a number set for how much, generally speaking, like if we I don't know, spend $50,000 on you guys, we would want to see $1 million in grants. But then if you go above and beyond that, there's a certain percentage that we would then add to your total. Are there any, basically, are there any agreements you have like that set up like that with any other cities?
No, we do not have any grant contracts with other municipalities of that nature. My understanding is actually that for a municipal contract, a win bonus is against California state law, but I can definitely double check and confirm that for you.
Be gift of public funds or something like that. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Councilmember Rohrbach.
Where do you hang out? Do you have an office in City Hall or where?
So I'm based out of Sacramento. My office is at 925 L Street. We're located right across the street from the Capitol. We find this is an advantageous location for not only legislation, which is not part of our contract with the city, but we're happy to provide that expertise. But also it happens to be within a 3-block radius of all of the departments where we submit your grants. So I can go over and hand deliver your grants to the Department of Parks and Recreation because we are located in Sacramento. We do also have an office located in the Bay Area in Oakland.
Does it make sense for you to actually come visit the city to actually talk to staff members occasionally?
Certainly, that is a huge benefit. You may not tell right now because I'm standing up here so well. I currently have a torn calf muscle. If it was not for this, your city engineer, Ray Razavi, and I would be walking up and down Highway 1, up and down the coastal trail. I think on my Fitbit last time we logged close to 3 miles of walking when I was here. So not only do I really love and appreciate the Half Moon Bay community, this is not a bad place to take a site visit.
You got that right.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Great. Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate it.
Alex, Matthew's going to do the next item too, but Alex is here quite often. In fact, we had CCAG out recently to do a site visit, and he took some time away from his personal commitments to make sure that we could fare well in that grant process, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, City Manager. I believe what she is alluding to was that I did, in fact, take my honeymoon here in Half Moon Bay.
And we did not pay extra for that, so. All right. Thank you, Alex. Okay, very quickly, I'd also like to give you an update of the acquisition of the 555 Kelly Avenue property. 555 Kelly Avenue is, I'll actually show you a map here first. In the lower center portion of the screen, there's some properties outlined in red. Those are the 3 Civic Center properties that the city owns here. The top of the screen outline includes the EOC and police station that the sheriff uses for law enforcement. The lower portion, which kind of has the jog at the bottom, that is the Ted Adcock Center property. It also includes the skate park. And you'll note at the bottom right-hand corner of the right outlined properties is a small parcel. That is 555 Kelly Avenue, located here to our right. Escrow closed on this property. We were directed by, I guess going back a little bit, we were directed by council to pursue acquisition. It was going on the market, and the city felt it was advantageous and opportunistic to purchase that property if possible and add it to this center for future public use. And we were able to negotiate a purchase of it. Escrow closed on Friday. It's a 6,800 square foot parcel with a 1,200 square foot residential structure on it. That building was built in 1956. And the zoning for that property is commercial downtown, which allows for a variety of uses. Obviously, the adjacencies are the Catholic Church and the Ted Adcock Center, and it's very close to the County Health Clinic across the parking lot here, Cunha Middle School, and the Boys and Girls Club Gymnasium across the street. Obviously, the best use of this is to be determined, but would be some sort of public use that would hopefully take advantage of its adjacency to the community center and the police station, and ultimately, City Council will make that determination.
Any questions about that? Okay, we're going to move along to the regular agenda. Thank you so much.
So, real quickly, just library update. I'll make it quick. I'll just give you a couple of slides of how things are changing. You see the July date there, July 12th to October 3rd. Big difference. You see the work is really progressing. I've mentioned before, take a look. From week to week, you can really see the change. We continue to be on schedule. I understand that we're predicting early rain this year, so hopefully not too much rain. And as you know, we're trying to get it sealed so that the work can continue indoors. So I'll just show you a couple more slides in terms of some pictures of the site and the work that's happening. You'll see here this big yellow thing is the elevator shaft. And again, we'll just quickly go through some of these pictures here. And then I just wanted to ask our Public Works Director, John Dowdy, to just give us a little bit of an update in terms of the natural disasters. And we know that they're happening in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, but they certainly have an impact in terms of the work that we're doing here as well locally.
So briefly, one of the questions keeps coming up with the bid packages that we have, and they continue to escalate. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of those that will continue to be a challenge for us and impossible for us to exactly know what the impacts are is going to be the impacts of our recent natural disasters, particularly Hurricane Harvey, which hit the petrochemical industry in Texas, and which means it's about 80% of the petrochemical industry for the community of the United States. So what this means for the library in particular is good news from the perspective that we had ordered materials and should have all the materials in place and stored and at least in order. I have friends that are in the business of for other cities doing this type of work, and one in particular, they're working on a fire station, and they've been told that they have no idea when various plastic pipe and materials they need will even go into production, let alone be available to them for purchase. And this is going to have some implications, and rolling down again, it shouldn't affect the library, but as we look at other projects and cost, this could have a ripple effect for us. And so I guess you can say that hurricanes do hit California as well. They just do it in a different way. Thanks.
That concludes my report. Thank you.
I need to deal with the report out from recent closed session meetings. I skipped that inadvertently, but we have nothing to report out. No action was taken. And now we'll move on to public forum. I have just a handful of speakers. I'll start with Paula Dyson.
Good evening. I want to address something that I've addressed before. I still am not happy with the results of anything that I've said or tried to get staff to do regarding recruitment. I was at the BPAC gathering this Saturday at the parking lot of the City Hall, and finally saw where our bulletin board is, because I've been told about this bulletin board that should have all the openings for staffing listed on the bulletin board, because there's nowhere else it's listed. It's not at City Hall inside. There's no book of or postings anywhere. There's, again, trying to recruit locally seems not to be a priority here. So I went over to the bulletin board. I was like all excited. Finally, I know where this bulletin board is. Go over, nothing, not a single listing of any job opening, and I know we have job openings. So that's my thing. I'd really like to see this changed and corrected, because anybody who lives in Half Moon Bay should be able to readily and easily find out what the job openings are. It should be available almost everywhere. Thanks.
Sure.
So thank you. All of our job postings are on our website, and so they're readily available not only to residents of Half Moon Bay, but to the world. And our application process goes through what's called CalOps. It's an online, so we don't take paper applications. I don't think any city does anymore. So it all goes through what's called CalOps, and folks can apply for positions online. So they're all readily available. Most of our positions, if not all of our positions, we've been posting, we've been buying an ad in the review so that they're available very directly to the public. But we don't post anything on the bulletin board in terms of jobs. I mean, it's just not done that way anymore, but they are posted on the website.
Thank you. Paul Gregoriev. Okay. Ann Martin.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council, and I'm here again to address you on the cannabis issue. You know, as I heard these beautiful reports about the magnificent park master plan and the hard work you do on the beach, it becomes so clear that we really live in a paradise of recreational, sport, and family-centered activities. And yet, as you all address the cannabis issue, this probably is an issue that's going to have a greater impact on the character, the family quality of life in our town, and perhaps any other issue you'll address in your tenure. I've spent the last 2 weeks as a former attorney researching this, the impacts in other states that have commercialized marijuana. And I can tell you the news was fairly grim. I sent through staff a memo to you, as well as to Magda Gonzalez, that hopefully you'll have a chance to read, that outlines just a few of the issues that I noted. One concern I wanted to address tonight was the impact of cannabis commercialization on our very fragile infrastructure. As a city, we have 2 single-lane rural access roads in and out. We have 2 ambulances, I understand, that serve the whole coast side, and 7 sheriff's deputies to handle the whole coast that they access through Highway 1, which is often gridlocked and sometimes closed, as we saw this weekend. And yet, you're considering introducing an industry that has been shown in many other localities to substantially increase crime, serious crime, robbery, armed robbery, as well as illegal grow operations in the communities where cannabis has been legalized. There are many, many, many reports online of this happening, both at the retail level and also at the marijuana grow facilities, because these multi-million-dollar crops are a very, very attractive target. And what more attractive target than that a dark, rural, limited access road with multi-million dollars worth of cannabis growing at night with large open space behind it. This could be very scary, very, very scary. Just use your imagination. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the traffic impact of a cannabis industry in town. That's something that I'm not sure that has been considered, which is why we're asking for a moratorium so that an independent study can be conducted of all these major issues. You've had several independent studies on the impact of the Main Street Bridge in town. This is so much more in terms of community impact than a bridge. I'm asking for a 3-year moratorium so this can be studied. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Sam Rashkin.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. In keeping with a light agenda, I'll be brief. My name is Sam Rashkin. I'm from Carmel Valley in Monterey County. I'd like to talk to you briefly about the at-risk population here in Half Moon Bay. Our weather's changing. We do have that community that lives behind Safeway in the Strawflower Village Shopping Center. We have an very active community here with nonprofits and people who want to help. I have public sector experience in this. I have private sector experience. I have nonprofit sector experience. And Half Moon Bay is a perfect test case because the willingness is here and the resources are here. I just gave you a copy of my bio and some of my background. Thank you very much. I did rewatch the cannabis meeting. You're doing a very thoughtful job. That would be my summation. Not too fast, not too slow. A very good discussion. Staff's excellent here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Dave Shore?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and public. I'm Dave Shore, homeowner, resident, voter in Half Moon Bay. On the cannabis issue, I'm aware that a number of council members are in favor of proceeding with commercial cultivation and retail sales in town. I would request that you take off the rose-colored glasses that have been handed to you by the grower community. And it's really time to start questioning the credibility and accuracy of the statements of the people who generally sit on this side of the room and speak to the glory and the benefits of the future of cannabis in Half Moon Bay. One of the growers stood up on August 15th here and said there's lots of money to be made here and alluded to all the money for the schools. That same grower at a meeting in September again alluded to the tax benefit to the schools, but also said, tax us 4% on sale on cultivation, and we're okay, but tax us at 12%, and we're done, we're over. Those are his words. There's a lot of inaccuracy and misinformation in there. First of all, any tax revenue, and there's no tax revenue right now from cultivation to the city, that goes to the general fund. The city general fund does not fund our schools. Our schools are funded through county tax revenue, mostly through property tax. So I don't know where he's gotten this conjunction of city tax revenues fund our schools. Secondly, and this is a grower, appears to be unaware that cultivation in general is not taxed on a percentage basis because it's very hard to assess a value of the product which is moving out of the greenhouses off-site to processing and back. Cultivation is generally taxed on a per square footage per year basis, which gives the city a constant revenue stream if this happens, as opposed to taxing on a percentage basis where, as everybody has acknowledged, the price is dropping and your revenue will keep going down. So there's a lot of inaccuracy there. Again, alluding to the taxes going to the schools is simply inaccurate. And then, but if you really unpack that last statement from that one grower, 4% tax, regardless of the accuracy of the taxing mechanism, 4% tax, we're okay, 12%, we're done. His words. What that suggests is that there's at maximum an 8% profit margin for these operations. Think about that. Nobody disputes that the wholesale price of the raw product and the processed product is dropping fast and will continue to drop. So what happens when you're doing an indoor grow? Your overhead and your costs are fixed. Your electricity, your labor, your water, whatever. So when the wholesale price drops by 8%, this whole industry is kaput. So either there's a lot of money, as he said in August, or there's no money in it, as he said in September. So he's being inaccurate one way or another. If he's at all accurate about the thin profit margins, which will become more true as price continues to drop, we had a cut flower industry that largely crashed because they couldn't move their product at competitive prices. Why jump on the bandwagon of a federally illegally product that's heading in the same direction? It doesn't make any sense. Please look at these arguments critically and for credibility and for accuracy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dave. That's all the speaker cards that I have for this evening. So we're moving on to consent calendar. Is there anyone who wishes to pull an item?
Madam Mayor, we wanted to ask for council's indulgence to deal with item 1B. Staff would like to bring forward a recommendation related to that.
Okay, so I'm going to pull item 1B, and can I get a motion to approve the balance of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Let's deal with 1B right up front.
Good evening, Council, again. I'm Matthew Chittister. We asked to have this item actually pulled from consent for just a brief discussion and recommendation surrounding janitorial fees. There's been continued discussion about the county's practice, or the city's practice of charging, I'm working on it, I promise. I said county, and obviously I work for the city now. So, the city's practice of charging a cleaning fee for users of city facilities, we made some modifications. The council made modifications to that practice at its last council meeting, but maintained that practice for weekend events and private events during the week. The main logistical issue there is that if an event takes place, say here in the Ted Adcock Center on a Friday or Saturday night, Saturday or Sunday night, where we do not have janitorial services and the user fails to clean the facility, the next user in the morning comes into a dirty facility. Right now, without 7-day-a-week cleaning, we have to ad hoc hire a private cleaning services come in for those specific events. The charge for those to the city is $186 per event. We've been charging those events $168 as a bridge between what they had paid under previous organizations and what we ultimately pay. What we found is we talked to some of the other cities in the area and similar cities throughout the Bay Area is that across the board, everybody has 7-day-a-week cleaning in their recreation facilities. The buildings are used 7 days a week. They're heavily used. Cities don't want to be in this predicament of putting themselves at risk to have one event create a mess that another event has to inherit. So staff would like to come forward to recommend a slight change to the proposed fee schedule that was approved last week to eliminate cleaning fees and instead pay to have janitorial services provided 7 days a week here at the Ted Adcock Center and at the Train Depot facility, which are both used heavily throughout the week and on the weekends. As far as a cost impact goes, if we took the remaining weekends in this fiscal year through June of 2017, at the current rate we're paying per day, it would be about $14,000 of cost to the city. I believe we can negotiate that down by committing to having someone here on a regular basis, and we can mitigate those costs and then work with our renters to make sure that the facilities are kept clean and that the work these janitors need to do to clean our facilities is minimal on the weekend. We have no other recommendations for changes, but wanted to propose that tonight to you.
Thank you for that. That sounds to me like it might be a good solution. Councilmember Rohrbach.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I think this is a testament to the fact that people really make a difference. People have been complaining, and rightfully so in this case, that nonprofits really do deserve a break, that the city should encourage it. So I think just like with the healthcare was ultimately defeated because of the wills of the people, the community involvement here did a very good thing, and I commend the city, I commend you, I commend Magda for making this decision. I think it was the right one.
Member Eisen, you were trying to jump in there a little bit.
I'll take yours.
Go for it. You can start.
Yeah, no, I just think it makes complete reasonable sense, so I'll support this.
Vice Mayor Penrose?
Yes, thank you very much for a wonderful job of listening to the public and of doing the research that enabled you to come to the conclusion that we could do it. And even though it is going to be a cost to the city, I think at this stage it makes total sense to have janitorial service 7 days a week. So thank you.
Okay, maybe I heard wrong. You said include, so when you say include janitorial services, do you mean include it in the fees that users pay or include it in the fees the city pays? Maybe I misunderstood.
I'll make sure I'm very clear. At this point, what we're proposing is that the city takes this on, and it's an additional cost to our recreation program for through the remainder of the fiscal year. In line with that comment or that question, I think it's important to point out that the other cities we talk to who do this acknowledge that the costs that they incur to run their programs are built into the user fees for their facilities. Now, we don't have a baseline for that right now because we have not performed a user fee study for recreation. That the citywide fee study took place just before the city took this over. Staff definitely recommends that in a year or 2 years, once we have a good baseline of how these facilities are used and the staff time it takes to run these facilities, that we do a fee study. That may not change the rates that we charge, but it will at least inform future decisions and make sure we understand our costs versus what we charge users for our facilities.
So now, thank you, now I understand. So the other cities that you benchmarked bake in some fees that ultimately helps cover some of the cost of the cleaning fee, correct?
They're room fees.
So what we've done is cut our room fees very significantly, and so we've unbaked the cost in. So it is a net cost to the city of $14,000. Correct? Okay, thank you, I understand.
Councilmember Ozen.
You know, interestingly enough, I did some research on this myself, and I did find that I really couldn't find another place that had a cleaning fee. I don't know if you went through the same process, but I could not find one other town with it. Now, I did find that other towns charge more, just straight up. So it was basically, like you're saying, included baking it in. So just throwing that out for a little piece of the research that I found out there as well. And I'm okay with this. I appreciate your work on it. Like, it is what it is. I'd be curious to find out when the library really kind of is up and running, what they're going to do. And I'd be curious to see if we can kind of benchmark off of what the library is going to do, because that gives us a sense of what another entity is going to be charging for those types of things. Because I think the library can, you know, the space can be used similarly. And I think they would have similar constraints. So that'll give us a better understanding. So I'm okay with this for the time being, but I definitely think we need to study it at some point in greater depth.
Councilmember Kowalczyk.
Just for, so
Hurry up.
again, for
Hurry up.
clarification. So this is for all fees, for all uses, both for nonprofit and for, so we are basically subsidizing for everybody. Got it. I understand. Thank you.
So I support this very well developed, very well articulated solution that you've brought forward. And thank you for doing the research, and thank you for organizing staff consensus around it and being able to communicate it to us. I think it's an excellent solution. I do agree that once we get some baseline usage, that we need to do a user fee study. We want to try and recover our costs. And if we don't do it through the nonprofit sector, maybe we can have higher, private, commercial use sort of fees to help make up the difference. But we need to know what our costs are. So I'm totally in favor of that. And if there's nothing else, I think I'd like, well, do we have to go through it, amend this and do another first reading, or?
No, the statute requires a public hearing for new or increased fees, but what you're contemplating here is basically removing and reducing the fee. So so you can do this on the second reading.
Was I supposed to open a public hearing for this item here on second reading?
No, that was already done.
Okay, so I think what we want to do, if there's consensus here, is to put forth a motion that amends the motion and the resolution to accommodate the elimination of cleaning fees and replacement with 7-day-a-week cleaning service.
So moved.
Second.
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Eisen?
Yes.
Councilmember Kowalczyk?
No.
Councilmember Rohrbeck?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose?
Yes.
Mayor Reddick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Yep. I just want to agree with Councilmember Rohrbach that we wouldn't be here if the public hadn't become active and engaged and pushed, and if staff hadn't done some real due diligence around this issue. So I think it's a good process, even if it's been long and drawn out. So we're moving on to resolutions and staff reports. Item 3A is the Main Street Bridge Rehabilitation Project.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, John Dowdy, and Ray. So I'll turn this over to Ray. We'll try to make this as quickly, do this as quickly as possible. I know
The wager has been put on an 8:30
there's
close.
a desire to deal with, and I'm going to remember that you took that consent calendar item not at the end of the meeting, but before that, so.
Next on the line here, so.
Thanks, Ray.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Tonight we're going to have two items. This is the first Main Street Bridge item that we want to discuss with you. And we're here tonight to have, to look at three separate actions. Number one is we want to affirm the scope of work for the Main Street Rehab Project to include the rehab of the bridge and the eastern sidewalk in lieu of the parallel bridge. These are recommended by the Main Street Bridge Advisory Committee as a response to Caltrans and the requirement for our federal funding. The second is we want to request that you direct the city manager to have Caltrans issue the notice to proceed so we can get started with the preliminary engineering. That will release about $1.3 million total for the fiscal year 17-18. That's the federal fiscal year. And lastly, we would like to have you direct us to formally request that the Transportation Authority redirect the allocated $500,000 in grant fund from the parallel bridge to the general bicycle and pedestrian improvements on or adjacent to Main Street Bridge. So just going over a few things about the rehab project. To the left is looking south on the bridge, to the right is looking north. This is a pretty narrow bridge. We only have two travel lanes, each one is about 12 foot. There are no shoulders. We have the sidewalks on the east side and on the west side. This is from underneath the sidewalk on the ocean side, the west side on the left, and on the land side on the right. You can see they were built at a different time. The left one is more dilapidated than the right one, since the right one was built decades after the left side, the ocean side sidewalk. This is some pictures that shows the wing wall cracks. These are pretty massive cracks. It's actually separating the wing wall from the bridge, as well as underneath the concrete's being exposed, the steel, and it's time we fix that, and we have to fix it quickly. We're also going to do some foundation work because of the piles that are existing are not sufficient for this bridge. So what we're planning to do on the, based on the preliminary rehab plan that we had on the left side, you will see it shows a different type of improvements we're going to do to the bridge. Foundation work on the sidewalk, bring it up to ADA standards, fixing all the concrete, exposed aggregates, and exposed steel. And we are proposing to, at this time, remove the eastern parallel bridge and separate that out, pull it out of this project so we comply with the Caltrans and the federal requirements, and put the signs such as the one on the right that the bicyclists could use the full lane as they're riding on the bridge. Currently, I see sidewalk being used by the pedestrian and bicyclists, and some bicyclists prefer the roadway, but they would have the choice of using the roadway as well and use the full lane. This is the federal appropriation. We have a total project budget of $8.5 million for the rehab work. There was about $7.5 million from the feds, that's about 88.5%, and a local fund of $1 million, that's 11.5%. And originally we were planning to have the TA pay about half of it, $500,000 from that grant. Currently, the federal budget is programmed for 2019-2020, but based on our work with Caltrans, they're willing to bring it to 2017-2018 and provide the preliminary engineering phase for us, which is about $1.3 million, and followed by construction of about $7.2 million. So that's what we have right now, the project status. We did have a field review with Caltrans, and one important part of this project is that NEPA scoping letter. This is a federal funded project, so we have to comply with both NEPA and CEQA. And the NEPA scoping letter was very important. That basically sets the stage that we could have a streamlined NEPA process for this project, as long as we don't have a lot of impact in the riparian areas. Removing the parallel bridge would provide us with that least amount of impact. Caltrans has approved all the design exceptions. For example, we have no shoulders. It's not according to Caltrans standards. The barrier is not crash tested, not according to Caltrans standards. On the north side, there's a curve. There's a horizontal curve that's a little sharp, and that's not according to Caltrans standards. But they've accepted all that. Yeah. So we can request the E76, and they are ready to issue that to us according to their local assistance group that manages federal projects. And also we're ready to have requests from TA to reprogram the $500,000 in the funding. So with that, we are recommending those 3 items for your approval.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Questions for staff, comments? I think Councilmember Kowalczyk's light was on first. Okay.
I move staff recommendation.
I have a couple of questions, very brief.
Can we get a second to that motion first, and then we can have discussion?
I'll second.
Okay. Councilmember Rohrbach.
I just wanted clarification. If we go ahead with what the city is proposing, you would in fact have 2 walkways, ADA compliant walkways on the east and the west side of the bridge, because it wasn't clear to me reading it. Is that right?
Yes, council member, we will have 2 ADA compliant beautiful walkways.
Okay.
One on each side. We'll make it beautiful.
You make it sound like our president. And the second question is, if we approve this resolution, is that going to require a vote of the people? I think you're being assisted in your answer.
I think that's a question for the city attorney.
Yeah, our office is looking very closely at that question. The Measure F, let's see if I can pull up the language here. As I'm sure you know, the Main Street Bridge Preservation Act provides that the bridge's historical, visual, and physical integrity, including appearance and character, shall be preserved intact, and its demolition or physical expansion prohibited. And my office is looking at that question. Basically, we wanted to make sure we understood the scope of the project in order to analyze that language with respect to the project. And so we are doing that now in looking at the language of the initiative as well as the legislative history, which includes the impartial analysis and the ballot arguments.
My 2 cents is, if we do approve this project, I don't believe that it does change the historic nature, et cetera, of the bridge, and would not require a vote. I'm definitely in favor of the proposed resolution.
You have one question or comment?
No. So, first of all, thank you for staff for, keeping the funding for this project. This project has been through quite a bit of back and forth over the years, and we still have 88% of it being able to be paid for, so I'm appreciative of that aspect. I do want to talk about, we do have this bridge committee, right? 10 people deep. I don't see any of them here tonight, or any of them that I know of, and I just want to understand, was this the recommendation of the committee?
The Main Street Bridge Advisory Committee made 2 recommendations. One was recommendation, basically, first bullet point and second bullet point. We separated, and the next item on the agenda addresses their second recommendation, but in line with their recommendation and request was to separate and create a standalone project. So that's why this got a little strange in terms of trying to agendize this and figure out how to proceed with this. But their recommendation is embedded in the first 2 bullet points, and the third obviously is a little squishy at that point. Technical term.
I'm supporting the staff recommendation, and we have a motion and a second. Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Eisen?
Yes, but I do want to, last thing, I want to make sure that we communicate with the businesses early on in the process, and possibly even the Chamber of Commerce, because I do know there was a lot of backlash from the like, what do you want to call them, vendors, and so let's make sure to educate, get people involved in that process.
Councilmember Kowalczyk?
Yes.
Councilmember Rohrbach?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose?
Yes.
Mayor Reddick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And thank you for your good point about some community outreach. That's excellent. So moving on to staff report for item 3B. This is the potential Main Street pedestrian and bicycling bridge.
I was going to have Ray do it, but I'll just do this one just for fun since it was kind of a... So this is the second piece of the conversation tonight, and this involves the parallel bridge. Let me say first and foremost, as staff, we loved the idea of the parallel bridge when it was initially put forth. Our consultant team put that out. We, as staff, sort of found joy and love in that item, but as we sort of proceeded with the issue of trying to get the grant funds from Caltrans, it became more and more obvious that this was a fight perhaps for another day and another location. So this was the concept that was put forth by one of our consultants with basically Biggs Cardoso Associates, and this was the idea that was sort of conveyed, was this swinging bridge, sort of arching bridge that provided you a separation from the bridge itself and allowed for visibility and visual sort of a corridor to the historic bridge, as well as the idea of providing an environmental education opportunity along that for the Pilarcitos Creek. So I think all interesting and worthy objectives. However, as we kind of looked forward, and particularly as it came down to this 2017 Caltrans condition, this became more and more problematic. And why that became more and more problematic is some of the issues that we'll talk about here, which was, again, a more detailed, this bridge coming out here, and you can see underlying this aerial are all of this riparian vegetation and area in the creek. The bridge itself is not impacting that area, and the objective with the rehabilitation is to have a very streamlined environmental process. As Ray indicated, they've indicated, Caltrans, an acceptance of that. And part of the reason why they have pushed against this one is because they knew we could not proceed with that expedited and streamlined process for environmental purposes. So as you look here, that bridge and parallel bridge would swing out and require removal of fairly significant amount of riparian vegetation, and also potential issues and impacts in the creek itself, requiring significant efforts and work in terms of environmental review. And you can see this again, this sort of the view of the trees and the trees here that would have to been dealt with, and in order to put this in, to remove those trees and vegetation. So, and again, I don't have to keep repeating this. So, ultimately, we've been looking at and identifying other areas for potential pedestrian access, including the east side pathway. So our first recommendation all along has been to try to get the SMCTA to reprogram the $500,000 to the Main Street Bridge. Our secondary position is to try to get them to reprogram it perhaps to the Frenchman's Creek crossing there to help us complete the east side pathway and connect into the Naomi Patridge that crosses at Rousseau Francais. So that's kind of where we've been going and what we've been working through and thinking in terms of the process. Because this was awarded, the SMCTA money was awarded on a competitive basis, we're not sure whether they'll program it elsewhere, but we're going to try really hard to, one, put it onto the Main Street Bridge, which would open up potentially local dollars to put forth for the Frenchman's Bridge. If not, then to try to look at the Frenchman's Bridge if you choose to proceed with not having this item. So I want to be fair to the Main Street Bridge Advisory Committee. I think their objective was a good one, which in part was to look at creating more of a gateway component to the Main Street Bridge in the Main Street area. And this is interesting. This was part of the historic records and archives there of the Welcome to Half Moon Bay sign that was actually posted right on the bridge itself. And then there's another picture that has it off to the side, but very interesting. But there, one of the discussions and thoughts through that process was to create a gateway and entryway to the city. Now, part of our issue, because we were not thinking in that context when we talked to the committee, was the fact that we do have in place, and the council has approved this concept for the archway to create a gateway, which would be at the north end of Main Street as well as the south end of Main Street. And this would be lightly illuminated and something to talk about. The other thing that Ray in particular has been, Ray has been working on, I'm almost there, is this enhancement of Stone Pine and that intersection is part, again, that idea of improving pedestrian access, and bicycle, and all of the things there. So along with the Main Street Bridge itself and these points, we think that the City Council has directed us to start to really look at the idea of this gateway point with that. So that being said, the other factor in this is that we are looking at, just in a general sense, about $1 million of city investment in this parallel bridge. So our ultimate kind of concern was that we were spending a lot of money to preserve a $500,000 grant that might be able to be used elsewhere, and even if not, I'm not sure that the $500,000 is worth spending $1 million to get if it's not something that's really critical, necessary, nor is it supported by Caltrans, and then also creates a situation in which we would have to do significant additional environmental work. Now I know, again, part of the question is, well, it's only $20,000 to do this study. And I agree that the $20,000 would not be the end of the world for probably the city or for us to deal with, but that $20,000 is for the consultant. We would have to go into a lot more review, a process, and the Main Street Bridge Advisory Committee's recommendation and request was to be part of that process and to look at forming a subcommittee of their committee to look at dealing with this. And so it would involve a significantly more time and effort than the $20,000 implies. So that's really where we landed on this, and why, again, we like the idea, we love the idea, frankly, but we think it makes sense to proceed in this manner and eliminate it from the project and move forward as you've already recommended in the prior item, which is to look to try to reprogram the $500,000. Thank you.
Questions for staff? Councilmember Rarbach.
Thanks, John, Ray. When I think about this, I've been assured now that there is going to be pedestrian access on both sides of the rehabilitated bridge. So then the only question is, what about bicycles? And if you think about it, right now, Main Street as it exists is like the least bicycle-friendly place in the world. It's dangerous, okay? So I don't think building a bicycle access makes any sense at this point. Now, I'm hopeful in the future we can reconsider how we're going to align Main Street, maybe make it one way, Purissima Street one way, the other way. Lots of possible things to make it more bicycle friendly. But until that point, I think having a bicycle friendly parallel bridge makes no sense, so I'm not in support of that. But I will mention that this gateway on the north and south side of Main Street really does appeal to me. And as Councilmember Kowalczyk has said, this is a quick win.
Vice Mayor Penrose.
Yeah, in thinking about this project, I was very excited about the parallel bridge for bike and pedestrian pathways, but we have a bicycle and pedestrian committee. And when we're talking about spending money on bicycle and pedestrian pathways, we should be looking at the entire city. And we should look at things and prioritize them. And I don't know if the Main Street Bridge is a high priority item for the rest of the community any more than making our streets more bicycle friendly or continuing up to Frenchman's Creek, the East Side Pathway, all sorts of things, all sorts of ideas. So I would like to leave this particular item as part of their job, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, and have them make some decisions and recommendations, and of course, using the public to help them to do that.
Councilmember Rosen?
I've heard from different constituents on this one, and it's. I think we should keep, unfortunately, for those constituents. I feel like the walkway on the bridge is the best way to go. I don't necessarily want to go down the other route, and I've heard from even constituents on the other side saying that the riparian area that you talked about is going to be so difficult to deal with if we put a bridge 20, 30 feet out, that we're going to end up in a nightmare situation. So I don't necessarily think we need to go down that route. That's my personal perspective.
Councilmember Kowalczyk?
Yeah, I think it's a clever idea, and I think it would look neat. But I also think the aerial view is very telling for me. I hadn't thought about it from the aerial view, that it changes the character of the bridge actually quite dramatically. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the idea, but I think we should continue with the path without this part of the plan.
I won't belabor the issue, but I agree with council members who've spoken already. I think you've touched on all the important points. Thank you. And I concur. So I think if I could sum up direction, it's we'd like to forego the $20,000 for the preliminary design work for this bridge. Thank you to the committee. They've hung in there in a fairly long, hiatus and provided good input onto the bridge project itself, and we're grateful for that. Not sure if there's a role going forward for them, but certainly, I think it behooves us where we can to tap their expertise, and so thank you. So that's it for that item, and we're moving on to future discussion, possible agenda items.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose.
Yes. We are 6 weeks away from the rainy season, and we have 40-some homeless folks living in our town who are going to be drenched again and get pneumonia and possibly die. I would like to see our city take a good, hard look at what we can do about the homeless. And
are you asking for a meeting?
yes, what I'd like to do is ask to have a special council meeting sometime this next week or this following week, where we can sit down and discuss what our potential is. There are lots of ideas floating around. Lots of people have been working on this issue. The city staff has been working on it. The county's been working on it. Our homeless collaborative has been working on it. Eric DeBody's Abundant Grace has been working on it. But I'd like the council to sit down, look at all the ideas, and come up with a plan. We don't have time. We can't put it off.
I concur with that need. We're rapidly running out of time. you know, the almanac says November is going to be our super rainy month. That leaves us with about a month to set something up. There's already some potential solutions in the work, and I know that Deborah will be meeting with the homeless consortium fairly soon in the next few days. I think if we can schedule a meeting, we might be able to, we might support Deborah in getting some more commitments from the county and these other groups. So I would concur with the need for a meeting.
Is it a separate meeting or an agenda item on the next council meeting?
She has requested a special meeting.
Okay, just for planning, I am not in town next week.
Are you available by phone?
I'm on the East Coast, so 3 hours ahead.
Anybody else want to comment?
Tomorrow, I'm going to meet with a representative from an organization called Downtown Streets Meeting, which has done wonderful work in Palo Alto and San Jose in getting homeless people out, cleaning up streets, getting a sense of dignity in their work, and has been remarkably successful. So that's something that, based on what I learn, might be very helpful in dealing with our homeless population.
Member Rarbach, the request is to schedule a special meeting. Are you supportive of that concept?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we want to go ahead and, City Manager, please.
Yeah, just to be clear, so we have good expectations. It sounds like you're interested in a bit of a free-flowing discussion. In other words, I don't know that staff has anything to prepare, because we don't have anything to prepare around. Between now and next week, it would be impossible for us to be able to provide any estimates of work. I don't know if I can have someone from the county come join us who might be able to provide some information just based on their experience or ballparks, that kind of thing, or it may be just an opportunity, so I'm just looking for clarification, an opportunity to gather information from the council in terms of what some of your interests are that we could further pursue.
I don't think we really need a staff report on this. I think staff needs to be present because there'll be a lot of questions that council will have for staff. I'll be meeting with the county on Thursday and talking about what the county would be willing to do to help us. We're talking to the Catholic Church right now. We have our new 555 Kelly property. There are a lot of options potential options that we've got to look at the problem. So my interest is in having the meeting quickly to get some council consensus on where we want to go and what the possibilities are so that everybody's informed and everybody has input on it before we take it any further.
So you're talking about discussing a potential city role in supporting a winter program?
Yes.
So I basically cannot participate on this Thursday. I will be away all day.
It would be better next week, early next week if possible. And we have Sam on Monday, so I'm wondering about Tuesday of next week.
Yeah, I'd have to check with staff in terms of our calendars because we also program things around
Sure.
council meetings. And we've got net starting Thursday, so we've got net for the next several Thursdays in a row already. Planning Commission is on Tuesday. Tuesday.
What about Wednesday?
Yeah, I'll consult with staff. I
Okay.
can't speak for everybody's calendar.
Yeah, I don't want to let it go much longer, though.
I can't speak for if people have other
course.
commitments.
Council reports?
I think it's just on that. I think it's really critical we have, even if we sit and talk amongst ourselves is helpful, but I think it's really critical that we have staff and even county representation there, specifically because the resources for funding social services for the homeless come from the county, and I think they need to be at the table, or at least in the audience and participating in that. Without it, it's sort of having a discussion where we don't have any means to take action, or a lot of the opportunity isn't there. I think it's, so at the expense of speed, potentially, I think we should make sure the county is participating in that.
So October 11th is a Wednesday. Would that work for us? Would it work for staff? I don't know.
They will confab at City Hall tomorrow on their own schedules and let us know of some available dates. Report, or shall we adjourn?
Let's adjourn.
I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Good evening.